I wish people would just put money aside and actually try and focus on the relationship without the money, try and focus on the experience without the money. Not that they should put it away, but they shouldn't actually be thinking about how much or what someone is using that money to do for you. Like, if a lot of people, more so women, would actually stop associating money with anything that they're getting, then it would probably be easier for them to figure out.
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Welcome to the Breaktime Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who believes that astrology should have been the study of ass. He is also a man whose sickness for the thickness prevents him from skinny dipping. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. This episode has come through and I intend on trying things light, trying things heavy, and just talking about a lot of things that revolve around love, sex, and relationships. Although, interestingly enough, this episode doesn't seem to have a particular theme, just mostly because it dabbles around dating and there's some stuff for guys, but there's also some stuff that, is supposed to show how guys think, but it's more suited towards women. But all in all, it is a Friday episode, meaning that I get to dive into the wonderful world of X and pull up some of the many opinions that you guys put out on that online platform. And considering that it is something that is put up on an online platform viewed by just about anyone or everyone, then it does mean that you can also send in the different opinions that you feel should be discussed. And the drill on how to do it is pretty simple, regardless of whether you are on X, Facebook, or IG, and I will explain how, because it almost sounds like a song and it goes like this. You see that tweet, you like that tweet, you want us to discuss that tweet, you send that tweet. You send it to the DMs of @BagakaTheD, which happens to be my personal X handle, and I will take it from there, and I will handle it accordingly. On Facebook or on IG, if it happens to be a screenshot or a screen grab, or if it ended up on a reel, then the place to send it to is @TheBreaktime_podcast on IG, or @TheBreaktime_podcast on Facebook, and I will take it from there, and I will handle it accordingly. Now, I've got a couple of tweets that I need to break down, and interestingly enough, one of them is a particularly interesting take from a woman that I feel probably just seemed to miss the mark on something that she thought seemed to make quite a bit of sense. But before I can get into any of that, I first want to go back to IG for a little bit so that I can break down something that I have noticed that has sort of been a thing for the past 2 weeks. Now, for anyone who's used IG long enough that will scroll through stories, you have noticed that there has been this thing where people have story templates, where there's some sort of a template that people will use up, and you can add yours and make your own custom version of that template so that you can post it up on your stories that can give a little bit more info about you, or can answer a couple more questions and give a couple more details here and there. Now, the one that I saw recently over these past 2 weeks is the love language template. So it's a love language chart, and it's supposed to indicate how far in terms of like a bar or like an indication on a bar where you are in terms of the love languages. Now, normally this is something that's so petty and shouldn't really be something that I talk about. It's just there's some things that people never really think affects them, yet it actually does. And the love language example is a pretty good one, because on this chart here, or at least on this template, there's 6 love languages. Now, for anyone who has ever tried to do a little bit of research, you know that there's 5 love languages, and they are actually here. So one is physical touch, the other is acts of service, the other one is words of affirmation, the fourth one is quality time, and the fifth one is receiving gifts, or gifting, as people would call it. But now there's a 6th one that is on this list which just did not seem to make perfect sense, which is acts of money. And considering that it's mostly women that were doing this template, actually the only people that I saw that were posting up this story template were actually women, I'd see them select acts of money and put like the full thing on it and like indicate the end of the bar. And frankly, like, don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm against the idea of just looking at something in a bit of a comical way or in a bit of an idealistic fantasy type way, but how exactly does acts of money really function as a love language? Because every single one of these love languages is something that may require a certain amount of money, in as much as you may not see it happen directly or indirectly. Now, for example, physical touch, there's people that will fly across the world to go and see their loved ones. That is an act of love which can be classified as physical touch, because they want to be near them, they want to hold them, and they want to spend quality physical face-to-face time with them, which is something that is particularly good. But at the same time, there's gifting, which a lot of women tend to resonate with in terms of, how you use your money to, make them feel a lot better. And that's probably why you'll see the more direct use of someone actually putting in some act that requires money. But quality time, you don't know if someone is sacrificing time that they'd have used to make money, or sacrificing, time by paying for time off. So for example, taking unpaid leave so that they can spend time with you. And that is actually an act of money in some way, shape or form. It's just that it's more indirect. And, acts of service also falls under something that can carry quite a bit of money. But I look at this entire template and I look at how people are looking at utilizing money as an act of love. And frankly, it's not like I'm saying this because I don't have it or because I don't want to spend it or anything, but I wish people would just put money aside and actually try and focus on the relationship without the money, try and focus on the experience without the money. Not that they should put it away, but they shouldn't actually be thinking about how much or what someone is using that money to do for you. If a lot of people, more so women, would actually stop associating money with anything that they're getting, then it would probably be easier for them to figure out who someone is, because you get to see someone for their values and what it is that they actually do for you, not necessarily with the requirement of money, but just what it is that they choose to do for you, how they talk to you, how they treat you, and their values and their characteristics and shit. And then you can actually figure out if this is someone you want to be with. Because when you think about it, there's so many people that get clouded because of money. There's a lot of people that will see grandiose acts that require a shit ton of money, and they'll assume that this person loves them more because they've spent more money on them. And that's not really the case. There's a lot of women that will end up making certain drastic decisions or falling for someone because they feel like, because so and so spent X amount of money on me, they must definitely love me, which isn't really the case. There's people that will do that to appease themselves. And, there's people that will do that for bragging rights. There's guys that will literally spend a shit ton of money on a babe so that they can brag to their friends and be like, oh, I'm this top tier dude because I spent X amount on my babe. And it is something that guys will do. Now, it might seem good to you for the time being, but if suddenly that doesn't appeal to the homies or whoever it is that they're trying to brag to anymore, then they might just start treating you like shit. But then again, I don't want to sound like I'm a stingy person or I'm against the use of money. At the end of the day, if it's your money and you want to spend it, you do you. Don't dictate what someone should do with their money, of course. But all in all, people overstate the value of money in relationships today, and people overestimate the value of money when it comes to making your relationship better or worse. Although, then again, I might be wrong about that, and I will leave it at that because I am supposed to be handling the tweet. So let me move it on to our very first tweet of this episode. Now, this one isn't even written down, it's actually a video. And it's one that the person who was talking on the video did actually even consider it a controversial take. Now, I am going to play it for you, then I am going to get into my thoughts on the entire thing. So, without further ado...
A bit controversial. But for me, when I started in corporate, specifically when I started working for an international company, and maybe this is why my point is as such. But I think it's so important if you work in an international company to have a mentor who is a man who is white.
Interesting.
Because the audacity of a white man is like nothing I've seen before. Truly, truly, truly. They are so confident, so, audacious, that I think sometimes, for me, the amount of time I spent with that guy just under his mentorship and under his wings, till this day I can track back and say, for sure, everything I learned in terms of how to handle myself in a room, how to present myself, how to believe in, sometimes believing my own bullshit. In that moment, I'm like,
yeah.
What is this? But I'm like, what would, insert name here, what would he do? How would he show up in this meeting? How would he present this, whatever? So I feel like, as much as this might be an unpopular opinion, if you have access to a mentor who is a man and is white, I think those are the kind of people that you should kind of surround yourself with, because the way they occupy space, they take up space like it's theirs. They know this is my space. So that I found was very beneficial. So I'm curious, have you had that experience, like with someone, a guy of a different race that you felt, has been very monumental?
Okay. So first of all, no. And I'm not saying no in terms of have I had an experience with a white boss or a mentor who's white, blah blah. No, that's not it. That's my reaction to the whole idea that this is a controversial thing. I feel like it's more wrong than it is controversial. Although then again, it is something that could be agreed or disagreed by some other people. But you know what? I'll just let this one slide because it is something that some people may agree or disagree with. But with that said, I feel like the biggest issue here isn't necessarily, what it is that the guy does or the fact that it's a man. I think it's just the fact that he's white. And she's talking about this, and she's Kenyan, and she is talking on a platform that is mainly pushed to Kenyans. And the thing is, I'm not disproving what she said about the dude. It's just all of those things can be done by a black man, by an African man. Those are things that you see guys doing all the time. And yes, maybe the white guy can do it in a better tailored suit with a slightly more confident, better walk and shit. But all of those things are things that can be taught to us guys as well. Those are things that I do myself from time to time. Now, of course, it's not like I'm using myself as the pillar of this is what you're supposed to look like, do, and act, but a lot of the things that she's spoken about, those are things that I've also learned over time. Now, granted, I have learned them from white men and a Latino man, of course, but that was through YouTube. I was watching videos from content creators like Alpha M, Real Men, Real Style, Teaching Men Fashion, and I learned a lot about dressing, a lot about exuding confidence in terms of how you looked, and those things have been particularly useful for me today. I've also learned from other places online, not necessarily just white men, but you read certain blogs, you check out certain articles, you learn from other content creators as well, and you learn things like confidence, how to carry yourself, how to speak with confidence, whether it's bullshit or not. And you realize that all of those things aren't particularly something that you can get from a white man. And interestingly enough, all the things that she mentioned, all the things that I'm talking about, are useful when you're in mid to senior management level for most companies that are international today. So it doesn't even matter if you're a white man, a black man, an Asian man, an Indian man. It doesn't matter what race you are. You just have to carry those qualities with you because that's how you get to move ahead. That's how you see a lot of those guys navigating the world of corporate management and shit. So to pin this on a white man, that was pretty wrong. I feel like any man can give it, and hell, you can even get this from women. So the issue here isn't even gender, it's literally just race. I don't have any problem with a man learning from an older female mentor or from a female mentor and a woman learning from a male mentor. Or, you can just even align the genders. The problem here is just the race. Stop bringing race to something that even other men of other races can do. Otherwise, it starts to give the very poor idea that white men in management actually do exude those qualities, of which, I kid you not, there's a lot of them that actually don't. But then again, I might be wrong about this one, so I'm going to leave it at that and move it on to our very next tweet of this episode, which was posted up by a dude who said, and I quote, "Let me remind you that 90% of women will never marry rich. They will have to settle at some point with an average man. The 10% that will marry rich men will have to share the men with other women." End quote. Okay, so this is one of those realities that a lot of women in the dating market never like to accept because it kind of shatters their Prince Charming fantasy to a certain degree. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like there aren't men that make good money that will want to be monogamous and will stick to one woman. Don't get me wrong, those guys exist. They are there, and if you bag one, hold on to them tight and always treat them as best as you can. But that said, there's a lot of guys that make a lot of money that just can't seem to stick to one woman, even though they may just have one wife. Now, I'm not saying that the guy has to have multiple baby mamas or the guy will have multiple baby mamas and shit, but there's guys that'll have one partner and will have a bunch of other babes that they're busy servicing or that they're busy entertaining at any given time. And the unfortunate reality is there's a lot of guys who, when they make money, end up like that. And the kind of explanation that I'd give isn't the kind that a lot of women would like, but it's the truth. And it's that a lot of guys, unlike women, have not been conditioned and have not learned how to handle attention from multiple other people at any given time. So they start off when they're probably broke or when they're busy trying to grow, and they're not getting as much attention from women. They are trying to appeal to other women who may not even give them attention sometimes. But then they get to a point where they're making a lot of money and they look good, or, they just look like a high ticket individual. And all of a sudden, they start getting a lot of attention from other women. Now, it might seem like, there's some that are just hoeing around and that are just trying to bang the guy and come off a bag. But there's a lot of others that will express interest in nicer ways. There's a lot of them that will express interest from a less than a hoey perspective. And guess what? A lot of these guys are not conditioned, do not know how to turn away advances from other women. And this is something that, I kid you the hell not, a lot of guys do not know how to do, even in this day and age where people are supposedly giving it out for free all the time. So for a lot of these guys, they get to that point, they don't know how to handle attention like that, and they end up going in and they start banging multiple other women. Because guess what? As long as they have some assurance that they're going to get discretion for what it is that they do, then they're just gonna do it. So to be quite honest, it's an unfortunate reality, and I do think a lot more women need to get a lot of that whole idea of, I want a guy with a lot of money out of their system, and start focusing on better values. But then again, as they say, you can take a cow to the river, but you can't force them to drink the water. And I could be wrong about all of this, so either way, I am going to leave it at that and move it on to our very next tweet of this episode, which says, and I quote, "Men from the 1990s do not see shame whenever they are trying to take off the clothes of a girl from 2004, end quote. And the answer is no. Now, there's a lot of guys from even the 1980s that do not feel shame when they're busy trying to take off the clothes of a babe who's been born in 2024, even the 70s. Like, people like to think that, she was born in 2004, that's so recent. But you're forgetting that a chick that was born in 2004 is technically turning 20 this year, if she hasn't already. And the one thing that people refuse to get is that there's, of course, the whole thing of legality and morality, but people also forget that when you're at a certain age, you start to realize that the gaps in terms of age become a lot more allowable, and it's easier for a guy who's in his 40s to go after a chick who's 20 than after a chick who's 19. Just so you know. And I'm saying this not as a guy that's trying to go for younger babes, but just as a guy that understands how guys function. If they hear teen, they can run away from it. But if they hear 20, then at that point, it's like it's open season for them. Now, don't get me wrong, it depends on what 20 for a lot of guys. There are some guys that will have a ceiling, or should I say a floor, at a certain 20. And I've spoken about how I have friends who influenced me with like the whole thing of having an age floor, where they will have an age floor of a certain age. For some, it'll be like 25. For others, it'll be moving up every single year they turn a year older. But for a vast chunk of guys, the moment you're in your 20s somewhere, especially if you get to your mid-20s, like at that point, it's like it's open season for everyone, going all the way to guys that are in their 50s and 60s even. So for you to think that a guy will suddenly be deterred because the chick was born in 2004, like, niggas don't care what year you were born, they care what age you are. And in as much as that seems like a very weird statement to make, it's actually the truth. People aren't like, I wouldn't date a chick that was born in the year 2000 going up, or in the year 2003 or 2002 or 1995. People don't give a shit about what year you were born. People give a shit about what age you're at. And the older you get, the less of a shit they'll probably give. Up to a certain point, depending on who you are and where you're at, of course. But as usual, I could be wrong about that one, so I'm going to leave it aside and move it on to our very final tweet of this episode, which was posted up by someone who refers to themselves as Man Cave, who said, and I quote, "Your next move, tell no one. Marry, tell no one. Open a business, tell no one. Hit the gym, tell no one. Buy a home, tell no one. Build a network with powerful people, tell no one. As a man, you are most powerful when your life is private. End quote. Okay, now, I'm not the kind of guy that usually comes to say that you're wrong, just flat out, but in this case, dude is mostly wrong. Like, there are a number of things here that you just can't really do without actually telling people. And you actually realize the value of telling people once you actually get down to doing them. Now, of course, there's some that you just can't run away from. Like, the whole marry and tell no one, like, if you're gonna get married, not unless if you're going to like the AG's office, you have to tell people so that, they can come for your wedding, or, they can take part in like the bridal party and shit. Like that when you have to tell people, like weddings require people to attend them. So you do have to tell someone. Then opening a business, of course, the best, closest market that you have are friends and family. Those are the people that you try to push to. Of course, you don't necessarily have to appeal to all of them, but you will have to at least appeal to some. Otherwise, when you start from scratch with zero support and no one backing you up, then of course it's going to take you much longer, or possibly longer, before you can actually start making some revenue, if any. Then of course hitting the gym, that's one of those ones where you don't have to tell people. People just realize from the results, not unless if you don't really put the effort into it. Buying a home, that one of course you can do and tell no one. And if anything, it's probably good if you don't tell anyone about it. Then there's building a network with powerful people, which, like, if you're going to build that network, you kind of have to talk to those people. So you can't just tell no one. Like, if you're building a powerful network, it requires you to talk to people, so you can't tell no one about it. But all in all, for the most part, I'd say you don't have to tell everyone everything, but you do have to tell some people some things. And the unfortunate reality is there's some people that just do not understand where that line is drawn, and they will either tell too many people too many things, or they will tell no one anything. And both examples of people probably may not get that far. Although, like I always say, I could be wrong about this one just the same way I could be wrong about all of the other tweets, so I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On X, it is at BagakaTheD. On Facebook and on IG, it is at The Breaktime Podcast and The Breaktime_podcast, respectively. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.